everyone, so today I'm going to talk about how to set a good impression. And I think a lot of people end up thinking like, oh, when you set a good impression, you're basically going to be this person that is very fake, very nice, very overly smiley or laughing or extroverted when you're not. And honestly, I think a good impression is really just a best version of yourself. So first off, let me talk about, this is a stamp in the world of who you are as a person. It doesn't have to be in work, could be with personal life, could be in other places as well. And these first impressions are so important because it can actually change how people perceive you and also change how they respond to you and their behavior towards you. So first off, you want to be yourself. I think a lot of people I know, especially in the work environment, they're like, I don't want to be myself. Like, it's just not going to be that great. People don't like my real self anyways. Or the fact that they think that like they can't bring their whole self to work. I mean, they probably do bring their whole self to work instead of in terms of bringing 100% of themselves. However, they're not being themselves. They're being like a different, weirder version of themselves. Maybe very like type A, very professional, very almost like you're heartless in some cases. And you wouldn't think of like, oh, that's the person I'm friends with. You didn't think about that's the person I work with, you know? So there's a little bit of difference there. So first off, what do? And I would typically like to say, I actually ask my friends, family, and other people around me, sometimes strangers, like kind of tread lightly there, on like, what do they think about me? And it's really important to know about this because you want to know how do other people think about you, not just how you want other people to think about, because maybe there's a disconnect between how you personally think you are compared to what they see. So if there's a disconnect, either good or bad, if maybe you thought so poorly about yourself and then other people are like, oh, you're so amazing, then it's probably going to tell you something that you really are amazing. So don't really kind of beat yourself up to it if you're like, oh, I'm horrible, everyone hates me, no one likes me, when really they do like you. You just need to kind of acknowledge that. Vice versa, maybe you think you're like all amazing and everything, and then you start talking to other people and they're like, oh, she's so stuck up, or she thinks she knows everything, or oh, she's so introverted, she never wants to hang out with us. So just having like the people that know you personally, like friends, family, or people just around you, like for example at work, that is really important to know if there's a disconnect. And you want to kind of analyze that on a very objective note. You might be very offended and be like, oh, but they really don't like me in the first place. But first off, ask yourself, like, why do they not like you? Was it like something that clashed, or maybe just like the version of you that you brought to their table when you met that person or when you developed a relationship with that person was just really poor? Because sometimes that's most likely the case. There's always a misunderstanding somewhere. So you want to make sure you want to see like how do people view you, and then also how you view yourself, and then kind of bridge that gap. So next off, how do you even bridge that gap if there is a gap? Most likely there will always be a gap, but you always want to make sure you check in yourself and see whatever you're saying is actually correct or close to what they're saying. So what I like to do is that if I know there's a gap, I want to kind of bring myself to wherever I'm going, even if it's at work. And I know like there are some like really quirky things about people that they probably don't want to tell people. Like maybe they're a cosplayer and they work in a law firm and they're like, oh, but I don't want to talk about the fact that I cosplay at a law firm because it will look bad. Or maybe they go to like a financial role. Like for example, maybe they're a investment banker and they probably do a lot of makeup. They dress up a lot. They like to be very fancy and everything as a woman. And there's usually some stereotypes when it comes to that of like being all dressed up and glammed up and going to a financial role. They probably expected someone in suits or very hardcore and almost like you're like have no personality in some cases. So in that case, like it's gonna be a little bit tough, but I think a lot of times you do want to bring your personality to work at least. And if they ask you like, what do you like to do? Or for example, what did you do over the weekend? And you said, oh, I went to a cosplay con or something like that. Or I went to a convention where I did cosplay. You don't want to lie and say like, yeah, I just went to brunch with friends. I mean, you could kind of show a certain part of the truth, but not all of the truth. But it really is up to you on how comfortable you are. And I know a lot of people are not comfortable of sharing everything at work or in general to people that they've just met, and that's completely fine. But I'm saying about like maybe, for example, you're introverted, but you're going like over extroverted, you're like overcompensating, asking all these questions to the point where you're actually going above and beyond outside of your comfort zone, and now you start to say things that don't make sense because maybe, for example, you do end up getting to know that person and that person's like, hey, you're not exactly what I thought you were, and then they're like, oh, I don't really like who you are. Or maybe like for example, you were hiding something that they actually like too. But what I like to do is I kind of mirror them in some cases. You're not being them, you're not faking yourself, but for example, if their arms are crossed, your arms are crossed. Or maybe if they are leaning forward, you lean forward too. But however you portray yourself in terms of what you say or your behavior, that's a little bit different. But I think there's still like some objective things out there. Like for example, make sure you have good body odor, stay hygienic, have a firm handshake, all those things that you learn when you're about to start a job or an internship or interview or whatever. Do the same things that you would do in a personal environment and also in any other corporate or work environment. I think if anything, you just want to make sure that people know who you are when it comes to your attitude or how you come off in the world. So for example, if your friends think that you're very bubbly or that you're very cute and that you always are very funny, why don't you bring that to work? I think it does help that if you were to have a job that does align with your personality. So for example, that would do really well in probably everywhere else than maybe if you were in law. But then there's still also people that are very bubbly in law too. So for example, family law, that could actually be really good to help kind of soothe people's nerves. And especially if you are in a role where working with humans, you want to be able to show yourself, because a lot of people I know specifically, I don't know why, but people just hate lawyers. They just think oh, these lawyers are just always trying to scam you out. They're trying to take over everything. But then if you were the only one that's actually personable and being yourself and being basically very transparent, you may actually get a lot of new clients. They're oh, you're not the lawyer that I thought I would get. I actually really like you as a person. And then because of that, they feel like they can trust you or be honest with you. The same thing can happen with a lot of client work, specifically consultants. They probably think, oh, you're gonna be that typical type A dominant person, right? That says you're wrong and I'm right. No, if you want to be that person that listens and then you also smile and you're very fun to be around, and even outside of work, you're not just constantly talking about work or constantly talking about boring stuff, you're being yourself. You talk about other stuff that you're interested in, you're also able to talk about that. But I don't know, if you have an OnlyFans, I probably want to put it under the wraps, don't talk about that. That's just kind of weird. Just don't talk about that at work. I don't, maybe on a personal note, you could probably do that if you get to that point, but you just always still need to think about the repercussions of what happens if they hear about that. It's not always going to be their first impression of you, but also sometimes preconceived notions about what they think about some things that you say that may not have any context. So that's something to be important to know about. So that's what I think really makes up a good impression, but there's still a lot of other things. For example, how do you analyze yourself in the first place? So what I ended up doing was I try to see, how do I position myself out there in the world? If you're more of an entrepreneur, then you probably are trying to what is my unique sales proposition out there in the world? Either what you provide or how you are as a person. And for me, I had to think about this for YouTube specifically. I was do I really want to be that stuck-up person that just talks down at you and talk about consulting as if I know everything when I'm only 3 years out in the industry? No, I just really want to be your, I don't like to say this, but it feels weird, your big sister or a friend of yours that can tell you about how is it like, and then also what have I learned about, which is why a lot of my videos are very framed around what have I faced or how have other people I know have faced, rather than, yeah, this is what we do. And I'm yeah, but I haven't faced it myself, So I don't really want to be that kind of person. And it does show through, because if you are that bubbly person that shows up on camera, people are going to warm up to you too. And then also will trust you a lot more, be more honest with you, and even enjoy your presence, that the fact that they might actually enjoy you more. So even if your work is not that great, maybe your client facing skills and they like you as a person, and that sometimes could be enough to get yourself by. Not all the time, but make sure you do good work. But in general, I think it's really important to be yourself. And I think I would definitely agree that there's some places where you may not want to be 100% yourself. For example, if you are a daredevil, you love to go skydiving, you love to do a lot of intense racing, but then you're trying to run for president. May or may not work. Maybe, I don't know, who knows? I think Elon Musk, if he ran for president, that would be a little bit of a different story, but that's also how you can stand out. Even if you're not fitting into a mold, for example, I think a lot of people kind of imagine people who are in politics as very, very closed off, almost, always very professional, always kind of almost manipulative, if anything. But if you just spin a different version of that and make it your own is very important, because then they'll know oh, she's that person that does this or that says this or that thinks about that, rather than, yeah, you're just a typical politician. I'm not even gonna pay attention to you because you're just that person, that no one wants to be associated with or no one wants to listen to. So thank you guys so much, and see you guys next time. Bye.